My fellow Bahamians, 2024 is a pivotal year for our nation. It opened with horrifying murders and brazen gun violence that continued throughout the year. Murders that included children witnessing parents being shot while holding infant siblings in their arms, leaving them traumatized and scarred for a long time to come. What we witnessed in the House of Assembly on 4th December 2024, as the sound of the "Get him!" was heard around the world, as the Mace, the very symbol of the people's authority, was hurled into the streets, was not just a spectacle. It was a signal. Another signal was sent during the morning session of the House on 11th December 2024 with the suspension of 6 members of the opposition. The irony is that the father of our nation, the late Sir Lynden Oscar Pindling's throwing of the mace was applauded in our curricula surrounding democracy. Today, a once noble act shall be gazetted as described by the Speaker as unprecedented and deeply troubling breach. I'm left wondering if this is how Sir Lynden's act as opposition leader should now be characterized. I appeal to you, not as one who seeks to cast blame, but as one who shares in the sorrow of our wounded nation. The Bahamas, our beloved homeland, a nation of azure seas, radiant skies, and resilient people, now find its name whispered in the corridors of shame. The headlines of corruption, lawlessness, multi-sector political interference, and chaos have painted a grim portrait of who we are. But I say to you today, this is not who we are. This is not the legacy our ancestors bled to build, nor is it the inheritance we should leave to our children. When leaders prioritize their party's agenda and their pockets over their people, when those charged to protect us betray our trust, when institutions crumble under the weight of corruption, we must confront an undeniable truth. We have lost our way. And yet, as we close this year and our nation sits in this moment of crisis, we must resist the urge to point fingers without also searching our own hearts. The state of our nation did not arise overnight, nor can it be blamed on a single party, leader, or institution. No, my friends, this is the culmination of years of neglect, complacency, and moral compromise as successive governments flip-flopped between electoral votes. It is the harvest of seeds sown when we turned a blind eye to injustice, when we allowed dishonesty to become the cost of doing business, when we accepted mediocrity in leadership and corruption as the price of progress. But I say to you today, we do not have to remain here. This moment in time, as sobering as it is also a moment of reckoning. And reckoning is the first step toward redemption. Let us first reckon with the fact that our democracy, our sacred covenant with one another, is not dead, but it is gasping for air. It gasps when citizens no longer trust their votes to yield leaders of integrity. It gasps when the laws that govern the land are weaponized against the powerless and ignored by the powerful. It gasps when our young people march in the streets, not out of hope for a brighter future, but out of despair for the present they see crumbling before them. Let us reckon with the fact that corruption has become a tax levied on the backs of the innocent. Let us reckon with the fact that leadership without accountability is tyranny. The recent U.S. indictment of high-ranking officials and other events leading to the resignation of the Commissioner of Police, along with the series of scandals that have gripped this nation, are not isolated acts of bad actors. Revisiting my open call to action on crime published February 28, 2024, these actions were top of mind as they are not isolated, but they are the rotten fruits of a culture that has tolerated corruption at every level. My fellow Bahamians, today I speak not only to your ears, but to your hearts, for our beloved nation is standing at a crossroad. This year, 2024, met us grappling with the legacy of trauma brought on by the evil twins of the pandemic and Hurricane Dorian. The daily horror of murders and escalating gun violence brought to the brink of chaos, having faced its highest recorded murder rate, currently sitting at 116. As we endure the balanced riot of facing everything and rising, or forgetting everything and running, we could hardly catch our breath as we are confronted with rapidly rising cost of living due to national and global economic crisis, bringing our nation to the brink of collapse in a stew of rising tensions. The Bahamas, a land of resilience, beauty, and untold potential, is now under the shadow of disgrace. The shocking indictment of high-ranking police and defense force officers and possibly a high-ranking politician allegedly paid $2 million, colliding with escalating civil society agitation, spawned by a feeling of injustice and intentional suffocating of democracy, brought the nation to its current crossroads. Our democracy is under siege. Our trust in institutions is crumbling, and our people are grappling with fear and frustration. Scandals at the highest level, acts of rebellion against our democratic institutions, and the crisis of governance have brought us to a perilous brink. But now, my brothers and sisters, I ask you, what shall we do? Shall we stand idly by as our nation descends further into chaos? Shall we wait for someone else to fix the mess we have all contributed to? Or shall we rise as a people, united, not in anger, but in purpose? We must understand that the restoration of the Bahamas will not come from any single leader, party, or policy. It will come when we, the people, decide that we will no longer accept what has been, but demand what must be. It will come when we remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all hands on deck. We are at a crossroad. One path leads to further decay, a future where corruption reigns unchecked, where democracy is but a memory and where the soul of our nation is lost. And the other path, though steep and fraught with challenges, leads to redemption. A future where justice reigns, where transparency becomes the norm, and where every Bahamian, no matter their station, can stand tall with pride. Prime Minister Davis, your response to the question of capital punishment, that your focus is on prevention over punishment, is commendable, in part, as prevention addresses the root causes of crime. However, prevention alone cannot stand as the sole pillar of a comprehensive strategy to combat rising murders. In a society where the fear of consequences has eroded and criminals operate with impunity, a punishment that deters must exist alongside preventive measures. This is not a call for vengeance, but for justice. Justice that reassures victims' families and restores faith in the rule of law. Deterrence works when it is certain, swift, and severe enough to outweigh the perceived benefits of crime. Capital punishment in cases of extreme brutality serves not only as a warning to potential offenders, but as a declaration by the state that certain acts violate the fabric of humanity so egregiously that they demand the ultimate accountability. Preventive efforts are critical, but they must be paired with an effective deterrent system that reflects the gravity of crimes, such as the brutal murders of a 75-year-old woman, a valuable, productive, loved citizen, just days after the rape and murder by strangulation of a 12-year-old promising, hope-filled darling of our nation. The government must prioritize both prevention and a judicial response that reflects the demands of justice. To align with the Privy Council's directive that capital punishment be reserved for the worst of the worst, the government can establish clear, objective criteria that define such cases. Examples of those criteria should include multiple aggravating factors, crimes that involve heinous methods, prolonged suffering, or the targeting of vulnerable individuals such as children, the elderly, or disabled persons. Criteria should include impact on society, public murders, brazen killings in crowded areas, or acts that instill widespread fear and erode public safety. Criteria can include irrefutable evidence, cases where forensic evidence, video recordings, or confessions leave no doubt about the perpetrator's guilt. Finally, the criteria can include repeat or serial offenders, individuals with a history of similar violent crimes demonstrating a clear and ongoing threat to society. A commission of legal and psychological experts, alongside representatives from civil society, could be tasked with reviewing such cases and recommending eligibility for capital punishment. This process ensures fairness, transparency, and adherence to international human rights standards while addressing the public's demand for justice in the face of unthinkable acts of violence. To the members of the Progressive Liberal Party, the Free National Movement, and those who aspire to lead under new banners, such as the Coalition for Independence or Bahamian Constitution Party, the era of emotional, blind loyalty in Bahamian politics is over. The electorate you once depended on to vote out of tradition, nostalgia, or frustration with the other side has awakened. This is no longer a Bahamas where catchy slogans and empty promises are enough to secure a seat at the table of governance. Bahamians are watching. They are listening. They are scrutinizing every decision, every misstep, and every delay in action. Social media has become the new House of Assembly where your constituents are debating, exposing, and organizing in real time. The actions you take or fail to take are being broadcast not only across the nation but to the global community. The days of operating in a political vacuum, immune to accountability, are over. This new reality requires you to abandon the complacent strategies of yesteryears. No longer can you rely on familial ties, campaign handouts, or appeals to past victories. The electorate demands more. They demand vision, integrity, and courage. The current crisis, rampant crime, deep-seated corruption, and an erosion of trust in public institutions are reflections of decades of political neglect, and Bahamians know it. The time has come for you to confront these realities with bold, transformative action or risk being swept aside by a people no longer content with mediocrity. To the two major parties, the PLP and FNM, the back and forth blame game will no longer suffice. The people are tired of cyclical governance where one administration spends its term undoing the work of the last. The electorate now demands continuity, long-term planning, and a genuine commitment to addressing systemic issues. If you continue to govern as if elections are won by tradition rather than performance, you will lose not only power, but also the respect of a nation you are meant to lead. To the aspiring third forces like COI and the BCP, while the allure of a fresh start resonates with many, your path is not without scrutiny. Merely being the alternative will not shield you from accountability. The people want to know your policies, your strategies, and your capacity to lead with competence, a cool head, and steady hands. They will no longer accept charisma without a plan, rebellion without reason, or rhetoric without results. All political actors must recognize that trust is no longer freely given. It must be earned. Every Bahamian, from the laborer to the professional, is now armed with information and influenced by global standards of governance and justice. The electorate is no longer just voting for a party. They are voting for a future that aligns with their aspirations, a government that reflects their values, and a leadership that understands the weight of their mandate. To earn this trust, you must lead by example. Address crime not just as a statistic, but as a societal failure that requires both immediate action and long-term reform. Combat corruption with zero tolerance, not selective enforcement. Uphold transparency in every contract, every policy, and every interaction with the people you serve. Speak directly to the fears and frustrations of the Bahamian people, and more importantly, act swiftly and decisively to address them. The electorate of today is not one to be cajoled or manipulated. It is a force of accountability, demanding not only words, but tangible results. Failure to heed this warning will not just cost you elections, it will cost you relevance in the eyes of a nation that is ready to chart a new course. Lead wisely, for the future of the Bahamas depends on it. At this critical crossroads of democracy, justice, trust, and survival, the Bahamas stands at a moment where meaningful change is not just desired, but necessary for our collective future. To restore confidence in our political system and ensure the governance is transparent, fair, and truly representative of the people, we must tackle the heart of the issues undermining the very foundation of our democracy. Electoral reform, including campaign reform and the campaign finance reform, and the implementation of a robust Freedom of Information Act are key steps in this process. Electoral reform would ensure that every Bahamian's voice is not only heard but respected, that every vote counts equally, and that the diversity of our population is reflected in our leadership. Electoral reform should prioritize transparency at every stage of the election process. From voter registration to the counting of ballots, every step must be open to scrutiny, ensuring that the process is not susceptible to manipulation, fraud, or undue influence. Clear and accessible reporting on election results, including the implementation of real-time tracking systems, would ensure that citizens trust the integrity of the process. Electoral reform must address issues with voter identification and accessibility to the polls. At the same time, efforts should be made to ensure that voter registration is accessible to all, including marginalized groups such as the elderly, disabled, and those on our family islands through mobile registration units or online systems. The parliamentary registrar must operate independently from political influence. Currently, concerns around impartiality often arise, and political interference can lead to public distrust. A major gap in Bahamian election is voter education and civic engagement. Electoral reform must include comprehensive educational campaigns about the voting process, the importance of informed voting, and the role of elected officials. This would increase voter turnout and ensure that citizens make decisions based on understanding and not on emotional or superficial factors. The Bahamian electoral system should embrace technology to make voting more efficient, accurate, and secure. Introducing electronic voting machines and online registration systems could help streamline the process, reduce human error, and make it easier for citizens to vote. Electoral boundaries must be redrawn based on population rather than partisan advantage. The current system allows for gerrymandering, where constituency lines are manipulated to favor certain political parties. Electoral reform must include clear regulations on campaign finance to prevent the undue influence of money on politics. A cap on campaign spending would reduce the advantage that wealthy individuals and corporations have in shaping election outcomes. Requiring full disclosure of campaign donations and expenditures would also help curb corruption and ensure that voters are aware of potential conflict of interest. Along with electoral and campaign finance reform, the Freedom of Information Act would bring unprecedented transparency, allowing citizens to hold those in power accountable, exposing corruption, and ensuring that public trust is built on the foundation of honesty and openness. The implementation of a robust Freedom of Information Act is more than a political necessity. It is a moral imperative. Transparency in governance is the cornerstone of democracy. When citizens are granted access to government records, they are empowered to hold leaders accountable. This fosters trust, ensures ethical governance, and prevents abuses of power. Cross-cutting benefits include reducing corruption, as public scrutiny deters dishonest behavior. For government sectors, this act demands a shift towards openness, requiring ministries to maintain accurate and accessible records. Civil society gains the tools to advocate effectively for the public good, while the private sector benefits from a level playing field in bidding for contracts, reducing the hidden costs of corruption. Without a Freedom of Information Act, citizens are left in the dark, unable to discern whether decisions are made in their interest or for personal gain. The absence of transparency enables unchecked corruption, erodes public trust, and perpetuates inequality. When the veil of secrecy is lifted, confidence in governance can be restored, attracting both domestic and foreign investment. For the Bahamas, this act is not just a step toward justice, but a prerequisite for rebuilding a reputation as a nation of integrity. The absence of electoral reform, campaign finance reform, and the Freedom of Information Act in the Bahamas contributes significantly to various social and economic challenges, including the rising cost of living, limited access to health care, restricted economic opportunities, and escalating crime rates. These issues are all interconnected, driven by corruption, mismanagement, and the disproportionate influence of special interests which thrive in a system lacking transparency and accountability. In the absence of transparency, essential services such as electricity, water, and telecommunications can be managed by companies with close ties to political donors. This often results in inflated pricing, poor service delivery, and monopolistic practices that leave consumers with higher bills and fewer alternatives. In the absence of transparency, corrupt practices and favoritism in government contracts can stifle competition by giving preferential treatment to politically connected businesses. Without open bidding processes and public accountability, competition is reduced, leading to higher prices for goods and services, further driving up the cost of living. Without transparency, import licenses for essential goods like food can be awarded to politically connected businesses, limiting competition. This often results in inflated prices for basic goods, directly affecting the cost of living for ordinary Bahamians. Without transparency, political contributions from real estate developers and landowners can lead to policies that favors unchecked real estate development, driving up property values and rent. Without transparency and proper oversight, fuel contracts and transportation licenses might be awarded to businesses with ties to political donors, leading to monopolies or oligopolies that can set higher prices. This directly impacts the cost of transportation, fuel, and shipping, further raising living expenses for everyday citizens. Corruption and the prioritization of donor interests can lead to poor infrastructure development and ineffective public investments, stunting overall economic growth. This lack of economic progress creates a challenging environment for new businesses and limits the development of sectors that could provide more jobs and opportunities for Bahamians. The tourism sector, a key part of the Bahamian economy, may be controlled by a few wealthy donors with ties to political leaders. This could result in tourism-related contracts, licenses, or development projects being awarded without fair competition, restricting opportunities for smaller businesses and local entrepreneurs to thrive. A lack of transparency means that government contracts and public works projects are often awarded to businesses with political connections rather than to those most qualified or competitive. This restricts opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises and entrepreneurs, which could otherwise create jobs and stimulate economic growth. When public contracts are monopolized by donor-connected entities, it limits the potential for innovation and equitable distribution of economic opportunities. The absence of both campaign finance reform and the Freedom of Information Act contributes directly to rising crime rates by exacerbating social inequality, creating economic hardships, and eroding public trust in government institutions. When access to economic opportunities is limited due to corruption and favoritism, a significant portion of the population is left economically marginalized. High unemployment rates, especially among young people, contribute to frustration and desperation, which can lead to an increase in criminal activities as individuals struggle to meet their basic needs. The lack of transparency in the distribution of public resources and economic opportunities fuels this inequality. A government perceived as corrupt, unaccountable, and serving private interest rather than the public good erodes trust in the rule of law. This breakdown of trust in government institutions can foster an environment in which citizens are less likely to respect the law or cooperate with law enforcement. And when citizens see leaders or well-connected individuals engaging in corrupt practices without facing consequences, it sends a message that the system is rigged, leading to further societal instability and criminal activity. Together, these reforms will provide the framework for a democracy that works for all Bahamians, one that heals the wounds of the past, restores justice, and rebuilds the trust that is crucial for our survival as a nation. These changes are not merely reforms. They are the pillars upon which a renewed Bahamas can rise stronger, fairer, and more united than ever before. To those Bahamians who returned home with hearts full of hope and hands ready to work, only to be met with victimization and denied opportunities because of systemic corruption and administrative malfeasance, your struggles and sacrifices will not be dismissed or forgotten. Even if you had to leave again, you will heal from the trauma and unauthorized amputation of your peace. You will pursue, overtake, and recover all. Keep the faith. You represent the best of what this country stands for: resilience, determination, and an unyielding love for your homeland. It is an insult to your commitment and character when those benefiting from broken systems attempt to shame you with accusations of abandonment. Their audacity, arrogance, and comfort with life behind the walls of their ivory tower leads them to make the mistake of dismissing your struggle and achievements earned without a hookup. Let us be clear. Leaving the Bahamas in pursuit of psychological, economic, or personal survival was not an act of desertion, but one of necessity. You did what countless others would have done in your position. You sought refuge and restoration so that you could return stronger, better equipped to contribute to the land you love. The so-called brain drain is not the fault of those who leave, but of those who create an environment that makes staying untenable. Corruption, nepotism, and administrative incompetence have forced many of our brightest minds and most capable hands to seek opportunities abroad. When systems fail to reward merit, prioritize fairness, or provide avenues for growth, people leave, not out of disloyalty, but out of survival. And when these same individuals returned armed with new skills, fresh ideas, and a deepened sense of purpose, they are met with barriers erected by the people responsible for the conditions that drove them away. This is not just a tragedy for the individual, but a loss for the entire nation. For every returning Bahamian who is sidelined, a potential solution to our national challenges is squandered. To the culprits who weaponize shame against these patriots, your deflections will not stand. You cannot shift the blame for decades of systemic dysfunction onto those who dare to find a way out, nor can you silence their calls for justice and reform. The real abandonment lies not with those who left, but with those who remained in power, misusing their positions for personal gain instead of national progress. The work of Bahamians who have returned home is vital. Their voice is powerful, and their presence is a gift to this nation. We must keep pushing forward, demanding accountability and building bridges where walls have been placed. The fight is not easy, but it is worth it. Even in this dark hour, we are not without hope, my fellow Bahamians. But hope is not enough. We must act. We must rise with one voice and declare that the soul of our nation will no longer be traded for the spoils of corruption. The Bahamas must belong to its people, not to those who plunder its treasures. This is our moment, Bahamians. This is our chance to turn the page and write a new chapter in the story of our nation. It will not be easy. It will require sacrifice, courage, and the unwavering belief that we are capable of better. We demand freedom. We demand justice. We demand accountability. And we demand a future where no child, no worker, no entrepreneur is forced to bribe their way to opportunity. To the leaders of this nation, on both sides of the aisle, leadership is not about power. It is about service. If you cannot serve with integrity, you have no place in office. To the people of this nation, the power of democracy rests in your hands. Hold your leaders accountable. Raise your voices. Demand better. We must unite, not in anger, but in resolve. We must march, not for destruction, but for renewal. The Bahamas can be a beacon of hope and justice, but only if we are willing to confront the darkness within and bring it into the light. Let us stand together. Let us rebuild together. Let us never forget that a government of the people must be by the people and for the people. May God bless the Bahamas, and may we as a people bless the future of this nation with our courage, our integrity, and our unyielding demand for justice. Let us not be remembered as the generation that allowed the Bahamas to fall into darkness. Let us be remembered as a generation that rose together to restore the light. May history judge us not by the trials we faced, but by the triumphs we achieved. And may God grant us the strength, wisdom, and unity to fulfill this sacred task. God bless the Bahamas.